Ezekiel's visitors. On Monday morning, Olivia Vertigo's famous film star mother had to be at work very early, so Olivia was dropped off at the academy long before her friends. She was surprised to find the hall full of people. Cleaners with mops, brooms were sweeping in corners, Dr. Saltweather and some of the stronger teachers were moving furniture away from the walls. Others were peering under long tapestries and heavy curtains. "Don't just stand there, girl. Do something!" Dr. Bloor shouted from his seat in the middle of the hall. Olivia wasn't sure what she should do. "Are you looking for something, sir?" she asked. "Of course we are. A marble. A most particular marble. Get on with it." "Yes, sir." Olivia dumped her bag by the door and wandered around the hall. She kept her eyes trained on the ground, but there was hardly a speck of dust to be seen. After an hour of fruitless searching, Dr. Bloor ordered the furniture to be moved back, the hall to be cleared. "It's not here," he muttered. "So who's got it?" Olivia heard voices in the courtyard behind her, and picking up her bag, ran out to see if she could catch Charlie before he went into assembly. She found him coming up the steps with Fidelio. They were talking about a pet's cafe. "Hi, you two," said Olivia. "I've got news." "Look out, vegetable," said Damien's smirk, almost knocking her off the steps. Damien was a bit of a bully, particularly where girls were concerned. Olivia wasn't afraid of him. "I'd rather have green hair than a face like yours," she retorted, patting her freshly dyed spinach-colored hair. "Weirdo," grunted Damien, marching off. Fidelio pulled a face at Damien's back. "What's the news, then?" he asked. Olivia told him about the search for the marble. "It must be that thing that brought your cousin here," she said to Charlie. "You know, the time twister." While the boy stared at her, she took a breath and went on. "I met him, by the way." "You met Henry?" said Charlie. "Yes, in the ruin. Manfred and Asa were looking for him. He said he'd been hiding in the kitchen, so Bindi and I took him back there where those two couldn't catch him." "Well done," said Charlie. At that moment, Emma Tolley came up the steps, and Olivia turned to follow her. "Emma, stop," called Olivia. "I want to—" But Emma had already gone into the hall, where talking was forbidden. "I don't know what's the matter with her," sighed Olivia. She doesn't seem to want to be friends anymore." "Maybe you're too weird for her," joked Charlie. "Look who's talking," Olivia grinned, and bounced up the steps into the hall. Charlie and Fidelio made their way to the blue cloakroom, where they found Gabriel sitting on a bench. He was holding the bag of Asa's old clothes, and he looked worried. "What's up?" asked Fidelio. "Has Asa been after you?" "I reckon he has," muttered Gabriel. "Something attacked our goats last night." Charlie sat beside Gabriel. "None of them were killed, were they?" he asked gently. "No, they were just scared, and wouldn't be milked this morning." Gabriel sighed. "I think I ought to give this stuff back, but I don't know how to. Asa might get nasty." "Give it to Olivia," Fidelio suggested. "She can slip into the drama cloakroom in a break." "Okay." Gabriel pushed the bag under the bench and followed the other two into assembly. After assembly, Charlie dragged himself off to his music lessons with Mr. Paltry. Wind. The old music teacher had decided to let him try the trumpet instead of the recorder, and Charlie liked this much better. His lesson was almost enjoyable. At break, he found Gabriel and Fidelio wandering around the field. Gabriel still looked worried. He told Charlie he'd given Asa's clothes to Olivia, and as far as he knew, she managed to hang the bag on Asa's peg. "So everything's okay," said Charlie. "Not exactly. When I went for my piano lesson with Mr. Pilgrim, he wasn't there." Fidelio reminded Gabriel that Mr. Pilgrim had a terrible memory. He was always forgetting things. Not lessons, murmured Gabriel. Olivia strode up wearing a big smile. Done, she declared. I put the bag on Ace's peg, but guess what? What? Asked the boys. Asa came in just a second after I had done it, and he looked a real mess. He's got bandages on his hands, and he was limping. This didn't surprise the boys. Charlie told Olivia about the Pets Cafe and Asa being chased by a pack of dogs. Olivia found this so funny she had a fit of giggles that turned into hiccoughs. When Fidelio and Charlie went to English, Olivia, still hiccoughing, went to recitation. Yeah, recitation. Weird. Gabriel was supposed to have mathematics, but he was feeling rather odd. He wasn't wearing any second-hand clothes, so he didn't understand why he had butterflies in his stomach. And a tingle creeping up the back of his head. Before he knew it, he was in the west wing, climbing the stairs to the top of the tower. The sound of a piano began to echo down the stairwell. Mr. Pilgrim was evidently back in his room. When Gabriel reached the top of the tower, he knocked on Mr. Pilgrim's door. There was no answer. The piano music swelled. The bass chords thundered out of finale. In the silence that followed, Gabriel opened the door. Mr. Pilgrim stared at him over the gleaming black piano. Excuse me, sir, said Gabriel, but you weren't here before, so I missed my lesson, and I wondered if I could have it now. Now? Said Mr. Pilgrim, looking puzzled. Yes. Please, sir? Now. Yes. Mr. Pilgrim moved up the piano stool to make way for Gabriel. Thank you, sir. Gabriel sat next to the piano teacher, and without waiting for instructions, launched himself into his scales. When the scales were finished, Mr. Pilgrim made no comment. He sat patiently listening to Gabriel as he played two complicated Bach fugues. Towards the end of the second piece, Gabriel felt a strange tension in the room. He came to the end of the piece and rested his hands on his knees, waiting for Mr. Pilgrim's remarks. Sometimes the teacher said nothing at all. From outside came the chimes of the cathedral clock as it began to strike 12. I'd better go, sir, said Gabriel. You played very well today, said Mr. Pilgrim. Thank you, sir. Gabriel was about to get up when Mr. Pilgrim said, Gabriel, they have the boy. What boy, sir? The one that was here. Gabriel suddenly realized who Mr. Pilgrim was talking about. Do you mean Henry, sir? Charlie Bone's cousin? Mr. Pilgrim frowned. Henry. They took him, Gabriel. He needs help. Yes, sir. Gabriel stood up, and as he turned away, Mr. Pilgrim caught his arm. Wait. The music teacher took something out of his pocket and pressed it into Gabriel's hand. Gabriel could feel it was a large glass marble. It held a strange glow that cast reflections through his closed fingers. Take it, said Mr. Pilgrim. You can go now. Yes, sir. Gabriel left the room. When he was halfway down the stairs, he sat on a step. He wasn't sure what to do. If Mr. Pilgrim was right, then Henry had been caught. The Blores were searching for this marble, the time twister. Did they mean to send Henry back to a time where he couldn't survive? Gabriel slowly opened his fist. He glanced at the swirling shapes and colors and then closed his fingers over the glimmering ball. Better not look, he murmured. remembering what had happened to Henry. A movement caught his eyes, and he looked down into the shadowy stairwell. Mrs. Bloor's pale face came into view. She smiled at him. "You played beautifully today," she said. "Thank you." Gabriel stood and walked down towards her. He held out his fists. "I want to give you something." "What is it, Gabriel?" Mrs. Bloor looked slightly alarmed. "It's a time twister. It can take you back to how you were before." He took her gloved hand and placed the marble on her palm. "Don't look at it now," he said. "You have to wait until the time is right." "I know." She lowered her voice. "Cook told me. I thank you, Gabriel, from the bottom of my heart." Her slight black figure whisked away so quickly, Gabriel hardly saw where she went. He felt a lot better and ran lightly down to the bottom of the tower. "You're late," said Fidelio, as Gabriel put his plate of chips on the canteen table. Gabriel looked over his shoulder. The noise in the canteen was loud enough to drown his voice, but he had to be sure no one was listening. He sat between Charlie and Fidelio and, leaning forward, said, "They've got Henry." "What?" cried Charlie. "Shh." Gabriel looked around the table. No one was paying attention to any of them. "Mr. Pilgrim told me. I don't know how he knew." "He's so peculiar, he could say anything," said Fidelio. "He seemed to be very sure," said Gabriel. "Cook will know." Charlie stood up. "I'll take my plate into the kitchen and see if I can find her." "Better go now," advised Fidelio. "There's still a crowd round the canteen, so no one will notice you." Charlie walked towards the counter and then quickly nipped through the kitchen door. It was very steamy in the kitchen, and he kept walking into busy dinner ladies carrying pans of hot food and piles of plates. "You shouldn't be in here," one of them said sharply. Charlie scuttled to the back of the room, where he found Cook. She was sitting with a bowl on her lap, peeling carrots. Her eyes were red, and she looked very unhappy. When she saw Charlie, she shook her head. "Is it true?" Charlie whispered. "Have they caught Henry?" "It's true, Charlie," said Cook. "They've got him. How did you find out?" "Mr. Pilgrim told Gabriel." "Mr. Pilgrim?" Cook looked puzzled. "That's strange, but who knows these days?" "Do you know where they took him?" asked Charlie. "I can't be sure, but sometime after midnight I saw Zelda and Manfred come through the garden door. That means he's in the castle. I wouldn't be surprised." Cook shook her head again. "There's some nasty dungeons in that place, but the ruin is so big I wouldn't know where to start looking. Mind you, the cats probably know where he is. They'll take care of him." "What can they do if Henry's locked up?" said Charlie. "I've got to get him out, Cook." "Someone has to, that's for sure." "Look, you better get back now, Charlie. We'll think of something. We mustn't give up hope." Charlie had no intention of giving up hope. He sneaked back into the canteen, took a biscuit from the counter, and joined his friends at their table. "It's true," Charlie told them. "Cook thinks he's in danger. Danger in the dungeons." "Then we'll have to get him out," said Fidelio confidently. "We've got to find him first," Gabriel reminded them. "Come on, let's start now," said Fidelio. "We've got a half hour before the next lesson." They stacked their plates and went out into the garden. The snow had melted, and the sun shone down from a bright blue sky. It all looked very promising until they reached the ruin. When they went through the great arch, they found Mr. Whedon in the courtyard. He was nailing several thick planks across the entrance of one of the 5 passages. "Buzz off, Charlie Bone," said the gardener. "I'm busy." We won't get in your way, said Charlie. I said buzz off, shouted Mr. Wheaton. The place is getting dangerous. Why'd you think I'm doing this? They had a very good idea why Mr. Wheaton was blocking an entrance to the ruin. They left the courtyard quickly. That's obviously a way to the dungeon, said Gabriel. Now, what are we going to do? The three friends walked around the field in gloomy silence. Olivia came running up and asked why they looked so miserable. When she heard about Henry, she was stunned. That's awful! How are we going to rescue him? We don't know yet, said Gabriel. Charlie found it difficult to concentrate on any of his lessons. Teachers shouted at him, badgered him. Twice he went to the wrong classroom. If Fidelio hadn't kept an eye on him, he would have been sent to the head boy, and that was something he definitely wanted to avoid. There was something very bad in the atmosphere in the king's room that night. Lysander stared gloomily at his books. Bindi had a terrible cold. Emma worked away, silent and studious, and Asa grunted and fussed whenever he had to turn a page with his bandaged hand. Tancred's empty chair seemed to hold a huge emptiness that kept drawing attention to itself, almost as if a ghost were sitting there. The only happy person in the room was Zelda, who kept whisking everyone's books across the table. When she stared at Tancred's chair, it whizzed around in circles until even Manfred lost his temper. "Stop doing that!" he snarled at Zelda. "It's not clever, it's just stupid." "It's called telekinesis," Zelda retorted. "If you don't mind, darling." "I don't care what it is," barked Manfred. "It's getting on my nerves, so shove it." Zelda made a face and went back to her homework. Charlie would have found this funny if he hadn't been so worried. The minutes ticked by so slowly, he was sure someone had tampered with the clocks. He looked at the painting of the Red King hanging above Tancred's chair. What would you have done, thought Charlie. The mysterious dark eyes gazed out at him. The circlet on the king's head glittered as if it were real gold. Shadows moved in the folds of the deep red cloak. Then, unbelievably, the tall figure began to change shape and color until Charlie became convinced he was looking at a red and gold tree. Why can't I hear him, he wondered. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the tree had gone. My mind's playing tricks on me, he thought. By the time 8 o'clock came round, Charlie could hardly contain himself. He rushed out of the king's room with Gabriel loping behind him. Have you thought of something? Gabriel whispered as they hurried into the dormitory. I haven't got a real plan, Charlie admitted. But I'm going into the ruin tonight, whatever happens. I'll come with you. No, said Charlie. It's best if only one of us goes. You can keep an eye on things in the dormitory. I don't like it, said Gabriel. Anything could happen out there. Ace is injured. He won't be so dangerous. Charlie sounded a lot more confident than he felt. When Fidelio heard Charlie's plan, naturally, he wanted to go with him. No, said Charlie. 2 of us will attract tension. I think I should go on my own. Henry's my relation. Billy Raven came into the dormitory and watched the 3 boys sitting on Charlie's bed. You look as if you're plotting something, said Billy. We're plotting your downfall, Fidelio told him. Billy scowled. You think you're so clever, Fidelio again. The dormitory began to fill up with boys getting ready for bed, and the 3 friends said no more to each other. When the cathedral clock struck 11, Charlie put his cape over his dressing gown and slipped on his socks and shoes. Tiptoeing in heavy shoes wasn't easy, but Charlie managed to creep out of the dormitory without making too much noise. He began to feel rather excited about the adventure ahead. He was certain that he would eventually find Henry, and then he turned a corner and walked straight into Lucretia Eubeam. "Where are you going?" the matron demanded. "I think I was sleepwalking," said Charlie. "Rubbish. What's that you've got?" Nothing." Charlie held Cook's torch behind his back. "Give it to me, now." Charlie reluctantly handed over the torch. Interesting." Lucretia turned the torch over in her hand. "Where did you get it?" "I found it at home." "Did you now? Well, it's confiscated. Go back to bed." "But I can't see without my torch." "Then sleepwalk. Go on." Charlie turned back and felt his way along the dark passages. He almost reached his dormitory when he fell over something and crashed onto the floorboards. Picking himself up, Charlie groped the darkness until he found what had tripped him up. A body lay sprawled across the passage. Whoever it was lying so still had a mop of hair like Fidelio's. "Fidelio!" breathed Charlie. "Fidelio, wake up!" Charlie tapped his friend's cold forehead and shook him. "Wake up! Wake up!" The body didn't stir. Charlie ran to the dormitory and found Gabriel's bed. "Gabriel!" he whispered harshly. "Gabriel, help me!" Gabriel grunted and sat up. What's going on?" "Fidelio's lying in the passage," said Charlie. "I can't wake him up." Gabriel grabbed his torch, swung his feet to the floor, and followed Charlie into the passage. Between them, they managed to lift Fidelio and carry him back to bed. Fidelio slept on. He was limp and cold and barely breathing. Gabriel shone his torch on Fidelio's face. His eyes were wide open, but they stared out with a blank, fixed expression. "He's been hypnotized," gasped Charlie. "We can't leave him like this till morning. He may never wake up." Gabriel went to the bathroom and came back with a mug of cold water. "Sorry about this," he said under his breath. He poured the water over Fidelio's head. With a shiver and a moan, Fidelio opened his eyes even wider and looked up at Charlie. What happened?" he said. "You tell us," said Charlie. "I found you in the passage." "I tried to follow you," mumbled Fidelio. "Manfred caught me. He held a torch up to his face and made me look at him. His eyes were horrible, like coal, black and shiny." "You were hypnotized," said Charlie. "Do you feel okay now?" "Sleepy. Got to get some sleep." "Me too," said Gabriel. "Night, you two." Charlie got into bed. He took a long time drifting off to sleep. He was so worried. Now even his friends were being watched. Someone was determined to stop him from rescuing Henry. At the other end of the dormitory, Billy Raven lay wide awake. He was quite sure that everyone else was asleep. That's when he got out of bed. It was time to see Mr. Ezekiel. He knew it was no use waiting for Blessed. The old dog was an enemy now, and Billy was a little sorry about this. "Couldn't be helped," he muttered, wrapping himself in his new blue dressing gown. The powerful beam from his new torch helped him find his way quickly through the building. But once he was at the gaslit passages of the west wing, Billy turned off his torch. Almost as soon as he did this, he tripped over an empty jam jar. Something else lived in Ezekiel's shadowy regions, and occasionally it threw jam jars down the rickety steps that led to the attic. Billy wasn't sure if it was a ghost or something worse. He ran towards Ezekiel's room, but as he approached it, he heard several angry shouts. Billy put his ear to the door. "Someone's hiding it," screeched Ezekiel. "One of those wretched children." "The children," said a voice, except for Billy, of course. Billy. "The children were all home," said a voice, except for Billy, of course. Billy stiffened. He recognized the voice of Miss Eubeam, the matron. "I want it," growled the old man. "I must have it." "Calm down, Ezekiel. There are other ways of getting rid of the boy." "Has Charlie got the painting?" "Oh, yes," said the matron. "We made sure of that. You think he'll be tempted to go in?" Ezekiel's voice turned sly and eager. "I'm sure he will. Of course he will. But who knows if he'll fetch the dagger? Any boy would choose a dagger, all sharp and shiny," said Ezekiel. "We had a bit of trouble with Peyton," said Lucretia. "I think he knows more than he should." "You have to do something about that brother of yours. He reads too much." Matron gave a nasty laugh. "Oh, yes, he reads," she sniggered. "And that will be his downfall. Leave it to us." Miss Eubeam's laugh was infectious, and soon they were both swept in a bout of unrestrained giggling. Billy chose this moment to knock. "Who is it?" said Ezekiel, still chuckling. "Billy Raven, sir," said Billy. "Ah, I want a word with you," said Ezekiel. Billy entered the room. He was feeling hopeful. Surely he was due for a reward. He was in for a nasty shock. When the old man saw Billy, he screamed, "You wretch! You kicked my doggie!" But I helped to catch the boy from nowhere," said Billy, taken aback. Ezekiel ignored this. "Why did you kick my Percy?" "He wouldn't talk to me." Billy was beginning to lose hope. "When am I going to get new parents, sir?" "You hurt my doggie. No parents for you. You'll have to do better. Now get out." As Billy turned to go, he saw a look of scorn cross Matron Eubeam's face. It was quite obvious that she didn't like children one bit.